the last section of the training, you will learn about the process for determining eligibility for EBD. For this section of the training, you will need the EBD eligibility determination form. Please pause the video to gather the handout. After the evaluation has been completed, the ARC reconvenes to determine the student's eligibility for special education and related services. The ARC should utilize the Emotional and Behavior Disability Eligibility Determination Form during the ARC meeting to guide the discussion of the evaluation results and to document the eligibility determination. What are exclusionary factors, and why do we consider exclusionary factors? Students with or without disabilities often have one or more factors that may contribute to emotional and behavior difficulties. The evaluation team must rule out any of these factors as the primary cause of the student's emotional difficulties to determine and maintain eligibility for special education services. A student whose emotional and or behavioral problems are primarily due to one or more of these exclusionary factors should not be identified as having a disability. The main rationale for the exclusionary criteria is to raise the probability that an eligible individual is truly disabled and to ensure that students are not inappropriately included or excluded from receiving special education services. The first consideration of the ARC has two distinct components. First, the ARC must determine and document that the student exhibits one or more of the four deficits noted on this slide despite the provision of interventions to meet the instructional and social-emotional needs. At the eligibility determination meeting, there should be a discussion of the interventions that continued during the evaluation process and the impact of the interventions. The discussion is documented in the conference summary and includes an analysis of the student's performance as a result of the interventions. In the second part of decision making for consideration 1, the ARC must determine and document that the student exhibits one or more of the four bullets noted on this slide across settings over a long period of time and to a marked degree. To assist the ARC with determining if the behavior manifests across settings, the questions on this slide may be helpful. The intent of this criteria is to document that the student exhibits behavior in many settings with many individuals and that behavior is not appropriate for the setting. Some examples may include: does the inappropriate behavior appear in more than one physical setting? Does the inappropriate behavior occur in more than one instructional grouping? Does the student react in a manner which is inappropriate for the setting or occasion? Is the behavior considered a significant problem by more than one adult? Is there documentation of the behavior increasing, decreasing, or stabilizing across settings? Examples of data sources that may be considered when documenting that behavior is present across settings includes a review of discipline records, behavior observations, parent interviews, and behavior rating scales. The data sources used to substantiate that behavior is present across settings should be noted in the supporting documentation section of the eligibility determination form. Determination that a problem has occurred for a long period of time requires confirmation that the behavior is habitual, persistent, reoccurring over a long period of time, and in an ongoing pattern. Chronic is not time-based. This standard is intended to distinguish between short-term problem situations and the need for special education services. For example, a student's parents are getting divorced and that student begins to exhibit behaviors. This is a student who had not exhibited behaviors in the past. The student receives intervention and the behavior improves. this child likely would not meet the criteria for the behavior occurring over a long period of time. Examples of data sources that may be considered when documenting that behavior has been present over a long period of time include medical reports, social developmental history form, and existing behavioral data. The data sources used to substantiate that behavior has been present over a long period of time should be noted in the supporting documentation section of the eligibility determination form. In determining marked degree, attention is given to the frequency, the duration, and intensity of specific problem behaviors. The ARC should discuss how the frequency, duration, and intensity of the problem behaviors compare to same-age peers. You may ask questions such as, is the behavior of such significant frequency, duration, and intensity that it interferes with the individual's development? How does the frequency, duration, and intensity of the problem behavior compare to behaviors exhibited by the student's peers or cultural group in a similar setting? Examples of data sources that may be considered when documenting that behavior is exhibited to a marked degree include disciplinary reports, teacher anecdotal notes, transportation disciplinary reports, referrals to guidance counselors, behavior rating scales, adaptive behavior scales, classroom observations, and social developmental history form. The data sources used to substantiate that behavior is exhibited to a marked degree should be noted in the supporting documentation section of the eligibility determination form. It must be documented in the discussion on the conference summary that the student's deficits are not the result of isolated, inappropriate behaviors that are a result of willful, intentional, or wanton actions. For example, a student who maliciously and with premeditation bullies another student once or twice would not be considered eligible for EBD unless there were other behavior factors demonstrating a consistent pattern of significant, long-standing, inappropriate behavior. The third consideration in EBD eligibility determination is to confirm there is an adverse effect on educational performance. The ARC must draw upon a variety of sources and ensure the information obtained from these sources are carefully considered and documented. The statement of adverse effect that illustrates how the deficits impact progress in the general curriculum must be documented in the conference summary. Adverse effect may be demonstrated through, but not limited to, demonstrating behaviors that interfere in the learning environment, struggling with academic concepts due to missed instruction, impaired or inappropriate social relations, difficulty maintaining in a large class environment due to inattention, anxiety, poor emotional regulation, and the need for significant classroom structure, reduced transitions, predictable schedules, and intensive social emotional supports. For example, Jake's mood and anxiety significantly interfere with his cognitive processes, such that he is not able to think, reason, remember, and problem solve at a level that would be expected given his generally low average cognitive skills. As a result, he is unable to concentrate, focus, and participate appropriately in the learning activities in the general education setting with general education curriculum. On the conference summary, the ARC should document the review and the analysis of evidence confirming lack of instruction in reading and math is not a determinant factor in the eligibility decision. If the ARC has thoroughly addressed this issue at the referral meeting, they should be able to reference that discussion and add any additional information they may have discovered that supports or refutes lack of instruction as an exclusionary factor. This determination must be made only at initial evaluation. Consideration 5 on the conference summary The ARC should document information from the social developmental history and/or summary of past and present support that addresses limited English proficiency. If the ARC has thoroughly addressed this issue at the referral meeting, they should be able to reference that discussion and add any additional information they may have discovered that supports or refutes limited English proficiency as an exclusionary factor. ARC decision-making is governed by federal and state regulations, and the ARC must determine eligibility through consensus. This means that no one person on the ARC has the sole authority to determine eligibility. The ARC is bound to use the data and evidence collected during the evaluation process to determine eligibility. If consensus cannot be reached, regulations dictate the ARC chair determines the proposed actions. The last step in eligibility determination is to include all supporting documentation on page 2 of the eligibility determination form. This is the last step of the eligibility determination phase outlined in special education regulation. This concludes the module on determining eligibility for emotional and behavior disability. Thank you for attending and participating. If you need additional information, please contact your regional special education cooperative.